This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy coming to you live from Midwest Performance Cars in Northbrook, part of our AM 560 Signature Bank Business Tour. And we're talking about the bombings in Sri Lanka on Easter Sunday, targeting the Easter worshipers, to hear the D.C. Press Corps report it.
Didn't know that was a group. I thought we were just Christians.
And Catholic,
aren't we? Yes.
And Catholics specifically.
Yeah.
Roman Catholic churches.
Yeah, two of the churches that were targeted were Catholic.
All of them.
All of them were Catholic churches.
Yeah. And so there's something there. And I suggested that the Easter worshipers phrase was purposeful because the D.C. Press Corps, the International Press Corps, cannot associate Christianity with persecution. And asked for a response to that. And the Washington Post gave it to me. This headline. Ready?
I'm ready.
Christianity under attack? Question mark. Sri Lanka church bombings stoke far-right anger in the West. Christianity under attack? Question mark. The church bombings stoke far-right anger in the West.
There's no question mark. The churches were targeted to kill Christians on the holiest day of the year. And it was a well-planned attack, and it was by a group that, according to Sri Lankan police, wanted payback for the Muslims who were killed in New Zealand. That was their motive.
Could the Christian bigotry be more pronounced? Right? And this is what I said before, Easter worshipers designed to get pushback from white men on the right, so they could say it's about angry white men on the right, and that's it. And it advanced the idea that Christianity isn't a real faith, it's just a cover for a bunch of old, conservative white men who are angry. And that's what the Washington Post is doing with that headline. It's despicable.
It's so irresponsible.
Christianity under attack? Question mark. It's not just the Sri Lanka bombings. 321 dead. More than 500 injured. It's not just what happened on Sunday. As we've talked about, in France, 800 attacks on churches in 2018 alone. You've got thousands of attacks on churches, mostly Christian churches, in Western Europe that go wildly underreported. You had the persecution of Coptic Christians and Christians in the Middle East. Wildly underreported.
One of those killed a fifth-grade girl from Sidwell who was at the church.
From
a brilliant mind who was going to be a neuroscientist, and now he won't make it to his 12th birthday.
Sidwell Friends.
Sidwell Friends, excuse me, in
a
Washington,
student
D.C.
from D.C., one of the Americans killed.
Father. It's unbelievable.
For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by Jay Nordlinger. He is a senior editor for National Review and the music critic for the New Criterion, our friend Roger Kimball's outlet. Jay, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good to talk to you, Dan and Amy.
You heard my take on Easter worshipers and the D.C. Press Corps' coverage of the bombings on Sunday, and we now know who the alleged responsible party is, and it's a radical Islamic terrorist organization. What's been your reaction reviewing the coverage?
Well, we used to talk about the war on terror. That now seems a very old-fashioned phrase from the 2000s. But it's a kind of twilight struggle. It's kind of like the Cold War. It goes on. And you have to be vigilant. This is a really long war. And these people, these radical groups, have to be policed and confronted and beaten. There's just no choice. They won't leave you alone, ever. They have to be beaten. And it may be tedious and tiring, but there's really no alternative except for these massacres that recur and recur. That's my main thought.
And the response, though, is from some on the left, implicitly, if not explicitly, is this is reportedly, according to the Sri Lankan government, a retaliation for the Christchurch mosque shootings in New Zealand. And so this is a reaction to the rise of white supremacy. So it's it's about half a step short of saying you had it coming.
Yeah, that's just dumb. First of all, there's always an excuse, and these radical groups really don't need an excuse. They like killing, they like mass murder. Also, there's some experts who say that about this idea that these attacks were a response to what happened in New Zealand. This kind of thing was pretty well planned and brutally orchestrated. I sort of doubt it. These killers don't need an event far away in New Zealand to do what they do. They just do it. It's what they do.
Well, when you hear Easter worshipers were killed, does that offend you in any way? Or do you think that they should have just called us what we are, Christians?
No. I must say, Amy, I'm fairly relaxed about the language thing.
Okay.
These were worshipers at Easter services. I'm not sure that offense was intended. I think the main outrage is the mass murder rather than the coverage. But I certainly see the point about the coverage, including that question mark, which was just dumb.
Yeah.
And, of course, it's not just the far right who are outraged about this and alarmed. It's any decent human being, including Muslims.
Well, that's true. And certainly our peaceful, pluralist Muslim friends like Judy Jasser at the American Islamic Forum for Democracy would be leading the charge in that direction. But the language, obviously the murder is the most important thing, but the language, I just have to challenge you, is important. And Barack Obama, Easter worshipers, Hillary Clinton in her tweet, Easter worshipers, Julian Castro. I don't think that's accidental. I think it's purposeful, and I think it's political in nature. This is an opportunity to score political points, and one of the ways you do that is by continuing to politicize faith.
Well, you think this is an avoidance of the C word, Christian?
Yes.
That could be. Could be. That ought to be confronted. People ought to speak plainly, And the older I get, this doesn't apply to merely this area, but I don't know how you two feel. I may be older than you, but the older I get, the less I like euphemisms, the more I like straight.
Exactly.
Just tell it straight.
Exactly. Switching gears to secular concerns, you had big CNN town hall. All the stars were out, and all the Harvard students, too. Elizabeth Warren, in advance of that, made the big splash with her college debt forgiveness / free college plan. How do you react to that proposal, which is not dissimilar from what Comrade Bernie and others running have proposed, and Warren's candidacy generally?
Well, this is the opportunity to play Santa Claus. I'm giving away stuff. I come bearing presents. Someone else will pay for it, of course, these rich people who may not even deserve their riches. And I imagine it'll play pretty well in the Democratic primaries. But there's also a lane, so to speak, for a normal candidate, I think, someone who might appeal to moderate Democrats because they do exist, even if they're not activists. And it seems to me so strange that in this Democratic field, Mayor Pete, who ought to be the kind of out there guy, seems the prim traditionalist. It's just weird. I will credit Elizabeth Warren with having ideas and talking about ideas. Now, I think they're wrong ideas. I think they're bad ideas. But she does have them, and she does propose them, and she's prepared to win or lose over them. And I think that's a fairly good thing, rather than just the hot air you hear from many candidates.
Well, speaking of hot air, Bernie Sanders last night wants felons to vote. How do you feel about that?
While incarcerated.
While incarcerated.
I guess I find myself a little bit speechless, which is a bad thing to be on the radio. I'm surprised it's even a debate. And I think if Democrats continue to go down this path, we might as well just cancel the election and declare Trump for a second term, because it's just radical nonsense. Democratic primary voters might accept it, although that remains to be seen. I'm pretty sure that a general election public could never, ever accept it. I mean, it's just bizarre. And I think Mayor Pete scored with his simple word no. I mean, should the Boston bomber vote? No.
Yeah.
That's straight talk, and I don't mean any sort of pun or joke about that, I promise.
Well, I mean,
Well,
here,
he was reasonable last night.
well, is he? I mean, what is
so
what-
nice.
the bar for moderation in the Democrat Socialist Party is remarkable. Mayor Pete can say the Boston bomber shouldn't be able to vote while incarcerated, which will be for the rest of his life. But I mean, he's on board for reparations. He's speaking the same lingo as Kamala Harris when it comes to
Amazing.
reparations. And I mean, this is the voice of moderation. If you're just unwilling to wait for felons to get out of prison before they can vote, then you're this kind of fascinating moderate candidate for president who's the mayor of a town of 100,000 people. This is insane.
That's right. It's very much a relative thing. It's strictly relativism. A lot of these candidates sound like the campus left. And this sort of thing might be popular on campus. Will it be popular with a broader audience? I seriously doubt it. It seems the Democratic politics for the capital D has gone nuts. I even find myself these days sometimes nodding at what Nancy Pelosi says. And she sounds like an adult talking about AOC and so on. She was the ultimate San Francisco Democrat. And I couldn't believe at the time that she was going to be Speaker of the House, the first time I mean, because she was one of the most radical people in the caucus, a San Francisco Democrat, to quote Gene Kirkpatrick in that great speech at the 1984 Republican Convention. And here, Nancy Pelosi seems like sort of a moderate, sensible, sober woman trying to tamp down the radical children in her midst. If you live long enough, you see a lot of things.
He is Jay Nordlinger, senior editor for National Review, music critic for the New Criterion. Jay, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Best to you, Dan and Amy. Thanks a lot. Have a good day.
You too.
And he joined us on our turn